My mom secretly replaced the almond butter in my kitchen with peanut butter, then watched my daughter eat it while saying, "I thought she would have grown out of her allergy by now." When I threw her out of my house, she stood outside banging on the door, screaming, "I'm not leaving." That was over a year ago. Today, she's writing apology letters, and that's not all. My wife passed away while giving birth to my daughter, and what made it much worse was that in the aftermath, my mom somehow became convinced she could replace my wife and parent my daughter alongside me. At first, I thought it was just grief, or maybe her way of staying close to the baby. Plus, I was drowning in diapers and bottles and grief, and she helped. But it quickly turned into something else. Full-blown obsession. She started showing up unannounced, rearranging the nursery, ignoring how I wanted things done. She'd change my daughter's nap schedule because she read somewhere babies sleep better at different times. She'd pick her up while I was rocking her. She even started calling herself Mama when she thought I couldn't hear. I tried to set boundaries, but she brushed them off, told me I was too overwhelmed to know what was best. The last straw was when she enrolled my daughter in a daycare without asking. She signed the forms, handed them to me and said, "Now you'll have time to breathe." I was livid. We had a huge fight. I took my spare key back and told her to stay out of our lives until she could respect that I was the parent. She cried and said I was being cruel. That was 3 years ago. It hurt, but life got better. I raised my daughter on my own. She was my world. I kept things simple. I worked hard, kept our routines, and made sure she never had to feel such chaos. But then she turned 8 and started asking about my parents. She wanted to know why she didn't see her grandma and grandpa in a while. It caught me off guard, and something about the way she asked made me want to reach out. So I did. For her, I called my dad first. He was always the quieter one. He said they'd love to come, but my mom didn't say much during that call, just asked what she could bring. I didn't want anything from her. I just wanted one peaceful evening. And so, I planned a big dinner. I cooked everything myself. I made sure to include things everyone liked. It started off okay. Awkward, but fine. My dad stayed quiet as usual. My daughter was polite and a little nervous. My mom acted like nothing ever happened. She complimented the place, asked my daughter questions, and smiled a lot. I sat tense the whole time, but then halfway through the meal, my daughter started coughing. At first it sounded like a dry throat, but then her lips started swelling. She grabbed at her stomach and said it, "Shirt." I froze for half a second. Then I realized what it was, and I jumped into gear. I grabbed her EpiPen, gave her the shot tea, and held her hand while she cried. I called 911. My mom just stood there. She started saying, "I'm sorry," over and over again, but I wasn't listening to her. I was focused on keeping my daughter calm, telling her she was okay, help was on the way. The ambulance came fast. The EMTs checked her out and told me she was stable, thanks to the quick response. After they left, and I got my daughter settled in bed, I came back to the living room. My mom was pacing. She had tears in her eyes. She kept whispering, "I didn't know, and I'm sorry." I asked her what she was sorry for, and she just looked at me, and before I knew it, the dam broke. She started crying, letting out these painful, choked sobs. She had to drink water and sit down to stop herself from heaving. When we finally got her calmed down, she started to explain. She told me she had gone through my kitchen earlier that day while I was picking up my daughter from school. She'd let herself in with a hidden key she'd made before our falling out years ago. She went through my fridge and swapped out the almond butter in one of the sauces with peanut butter. My face went pale. My daughter is deathly allergic to peanuts. My mom knows this. When I told her so, she said she thought my daughter would have grown out of it by now, and it wouldn't be as bad, just a mild reaction. She said she was just trying to prove I wasn't as capable of being her dad as I made it seem. She said she thought that by giving my daughter peanuts, she'd give her a mild reaction, and watch as I panicked not knowing what to do. But then my daughter ate the peanuts, and when my mom saw how serious it was, she freaked out. I remember just staring with my mouth agape when she said that. She could have unalived my daughter. I asked her what was wrong with her. I asked her if she has any ridges in her brain, or if it's just smooth there. I told her she was the most idiotic, careless, stupid, disgusting, backstabbing, vile, putrid, heartless woman I have ever had the displeasure of meeting. I told her very bluntly to get out of the house now, and I turned to my dad and told him to get going too. They both stood there waiting for me to take my words back, but I didn't. I shoved them out and locked the door behind them. The nightmare was over. At least that's what I thought, because a few seconds later the banging on my door started. My mom yelled, "I'm not leaving!" I stood frozen behind the door, my heart pounding. The banging continued for what felt like forever, each thud sending vibrations through the wooden frame. I heard my dad trying to calm her down, his voice low and pleading. She wasn't having it. Her shrill voice cut through the night air, demanding to see her granddaughter, insisting she had rights. I checked on my daughter, still asleep thank goodness, her small chest rising and falling peacefully beneath her favorite purple blanket. I grabbed my phone with trembling fingers and texted my neighbor Thomas, who's a police officer. He was off duty, but came over anyway, arriving within minutes in jeans and a faded t-shirt, his concerned expression visible even in the dim porch light. When he arrived, my mom was still there, now sitting on my porch steps crying, mascara running down her cheeks, my dad standing awkwardly beside her. Thomas talked to them calmly, his professional demeanor taking over despite his casual clothes. I watched from the window as my dad nodded and finally got my mom to leave, guiding her gently to their car with his hand on her back. Thomas came back to check on us before heading home, his eyes serious as he asked if this had happened before. I thanked him about 1,000,000 times, offering coffee which he declined with a tired smile. He told me to call if they came back, no matter the time. I locked every door and window in the house that night, checking each twice. I barely slept, just kept checking on my daughter, watching her innocent face in the glow of her nightlight. The next morning, I called in sick to work and kept my daughter home from school. I needed time to figure out what to do, to process what had happened. The kitchen felt too quiet as I made pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse, trying to maintain some normalcy. Around 10 a.m., my phone started blowing up with texts from my mom. Apologies, excuses, more apologies. Each notification made my stomach tighten. I ignored them all, placing my phone face down on the counter while my daughter colored at the kitchen table. Then my dad called. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. "Son, your mother she's not well," he said. His voice sounded tired, defeated, like he'd aged 10 years overnight. He explained that she'd been seeing a therapist since our fallout years ago, but recently stopped taking her medication. The confession hung in the air between us. I wasn't surprised, but it still hit me hard, like a physical blow to the chest. My dad asked if we could talk in person, just him and me. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop while my daughter was at her friend Sarah's house for a play date, arranging it all with Sarah's mom in hushed tones. When I got to the coffee shop, my dad looked older than I remembered. The fluorescent lights highlighted every line on his face. He had dark circles under his eyes, and his hands shook slightly as he held his coffee, the liquid rippling with each tremor. He told me my mom had become obsessed with the idea that I was keeping her granddaughter from her out of spite, that she believed my daughter needed her, that I was somehow damaging her by raising her alone. His eyes wouldn't meet mine as he spoke. "She's not thinking clearly," he said, turning his cup in slow circles. But what she did, I had no idea she'd go that far. I asked him why he never stepped in, never stood up to her. The question had been burning inside me for years. He just stared into his coffee and said he'd failed us both. The admission hung in the air between us. I felt bad for him, but not bad enough to let my guard down. I told him I needed to protect my daughter, and that meant keeping my mom away from her. He nodded and said he understood, his shoulders slumping further. When I got home, I found 3 voicemails from my mom, each one more desperate than the last, her voice becoming increasingly frantic. In the final one, she was sobbing so hard I could barely make out her words. Something about making it right, about proving she could be trusted. It sent chills down my spine. I deleted them all, my finger hovering over the screen for just a moment before pressing down. That night, I sat down with my daughter and tried to explain things in a way an 8-year-old could understand. We sat on her bed, surrounded by her stuffed animals, as if they could offer some protection from the harsh reality. I told her that Grandma wasn't feeling well, and sometimes did things that weren't safe. I explained that we wouldn't be seeing her for a while until she got better. My daughter asked if Grandma had a cold, her innocent eyes wide with concern. I wish it was that simple. "No, honey, it's a different kind of not feeling well. It's in her thoughts," I said, tapping my temple gently. She seemed to accept this, her small brow furrowing as she processed my words, but then asked the question I was dreading. "Is that why I got sick at dinner?" I couldn't lie to her. I told her yes, but that it was an accident. I didn't have the heart to tell her the whole truth, that her grandmother had deliberately put peanut butter in the food, hoping to cause a reaction. She's too young to understand that kind of betrayal. She just nodded and went back to coloring, her crayon moving across the paper with deliberate strokes. Kids can be resilient, but I knew this would take time to process. The next day, I dropped my daughter off at school, watching until she disappeared through the double doors, and headed to work. The office felt strangely normal, as if it existed in a different universe from my home life. My boss Jennifer was understanding about the previous day's absence, especially when I explained we'd had a family emergency. She patted my shoulder sympathetically and didn't ask for details. I tried to focus on work, the spreadsheets blurring before my eyes, but kept checking my phone. No new messages from either of my parents. I wasn't sure if that was good or bad, the silence somehow more unsettling than the barrage of texts. When I picked up my daughter from school, her teacher, Mrs. Hernandez, pulled me aside, her expression serious. Apparently, someone had dropped off cookies for my daughter at the front office. The school secretary, knowing about her allergy from the medical forms I'd filled out meticulously, checked them first. They contained peanut butter, the secretary had confirmed by breaking one open to reveal the telltale filling. My blood ran cold, a chill spreading from my core to my fingertips. The secretary said the woman claimed to be a family friend, but didn't leave her name. I knew exactly who it was, could picture my mother standing at the counter with her innocent smile, the plastic container of homemade cookies in her hands. I thanked the teacher profusely and immediately called the police from the school parking lot, my daughter waiting in the car with a juice box and her tablet. I filed a report, but they said there wasn't much they could do without proof it was intentional, that it could have been a genuine mistake. The officer's voice was sympathetic, but unhelpful. I called Thomas next, who promised to drive by my parents' house and have a word with them, his tone suggesting it would be more than just a friendly chat. I picked up my daughter and headed straight home, checking my rearview mirror the entire way, jumping at every car that looked remotely like my parents. That night, I installed a security camera at my front door, the screwdriver slipping in my sweaty hands as I mounted it above the entryway. I changed the locks again, just in case my mother had somehow made copies of my keys. I even considered moving, but that seemed extreme. Plus, I couldn't afford it, not with my teaching salary barely covering our current expenses. I'd built a life here for us, my daughter's school, my job, our small community of friends. I wasn't going to let my mom take that away too. The next few days were quiet, too quiet. No calls, no texts, no unexpected visits. I started to relax a little, the constant tension in my shoulders easing slightly, thinking maybe my mom had finally gotten the message. Then Friday came. I was in the middle of a lesson on fractions when my phone vibrated in my pocket. I got a call from the school. My daughter wasn't in class after lunch. My heart stopped, the blood draining from my face. I raced to the school, barely breathing, running every yellow light on the way. The principal met me at the office, looking concerned, her usually composed demeanor visibly shaken. They'd checked everywhere, the playground, the bathrooms, the nurse's office, no sign of her. I demanded to see the security footage, my voice coming out harsher than intended. The principal led me to a small room where they kept their monitors, the space cramped and dimly lit. We watched as my daughter walked out of the cafeteria with a woman, my mom. My daughter didn't look scared or upset. She was smiling, holding my mom's hand, skipping slightly as they walked. They just walked right out the front door, past the security desk, where the guard was helping another child with a nosebleed. I called the police immediately, my fingers fumbling with the phone. They took down all the information and said they'd send officers to my parents' house. I couldn't wait, couldn't stand still while my child was missing. First, jumped in my car and drove there myself, probably breaking every speed limit, the world outside my windshield a blur. When I arrived, no one answered the door despite my pounding. Their car was gone, the driveway empty except for a few fallen leaves. I called my dad's cell, straight to voicemail, same with my mom's. The electronic voices asking me to leave a message seemed to mock me. I stood on their porch, panicking, when their neighbor Elizabeth came outside, curiosity drawing her from her home. She mentioned seeing them leave with a little girl about an hour ago, all getting into my dad's blue sedan. They had suitcases, she added, as if they were going on vacation. My stomach dropped, a cold void opening inside me. I asked which way they went, my voice barely working. She pointed toward the highway, her expression changing as she registered my distress. The police arrived shortly after, 2 patrol cars pulling up with lights, but no sirens. I showed them the school footage on my phone, the officers' faces grim as they watched. They put out an alert for my parents' car and my daughter, calling in descriptions over their radios. One officer stayed with me while I called everyone I could think of who might know where they'd go. My dad's brother in Michigan, my mom's sister in Florida. No one had heard from them, their voices growing concerned as I explained the situation. Hours passed. The police set up in my living room, radios crackling, phones ringing. I paced, checked my phone every 30 seconds, and tried not to completely lose it. The walls seemed to close in, the waiting unbearable. Around 8 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered immediately, nearly dropping the phone in my haste. It was my dad. He sounded nervous, talking quietly as if afraid of being overheard. He told me they were at a motel off Highway 16, about 2 hours away, a place called the Pinewood Inn. He said my mom had convinced him this was the only way, that I'd never let them see their granddaughter otherwise. But now he was having second thoughts, guilt creeping into his voice. He gave me the motel name and room number, 114, at the far end of the building. I relayed it to the officers, who called it in, their voices urgent but controlled. I drove there with a police escort, the patrol car's lights flashing silently ahead of me on the dark highway. The whole way, I kept thinking about what I'd do when I saw my mom. The anger inside me was like nothing I'd ever felt before, a living thing clawing at my insides. When we arrived, more police were already there, their vehicles surrounding the shabby motel with its flickering neon sign. They'd secured the area, but hadn't approached the room yet. They wanted me to try calling first, to avoid escalating the situation. I called my dad back, my hand shaking. He answered right away. I could hear my daughter in the background, asking for ice cream, her voice so normal it made my heart ache. At least she sounded okay, unaware of the danger she was in. I told my dad to bring her outside, that this had gone far enough. He agreed, said he'd try to convince my mom. I heard muffled arguing, my mom's voice rising sharply, then the line went dead. The police decided to approach. I stayed back like they asked, though it unalived me, every instinct screaming to run to my child. 2 officers knocked on the door, hands near their weapons. Nothing happened for a minute. Then the door opened slowly. My dad came out first, hands up, face ashen. Then my daughter ran out and straight to me, her small body launching itself into my arms. I grabbed her and held her so tight she complained I was squishing her. I didn't care. She was safe, her heart beating against mine. My mom came out last, escorted by an officer. She looked wild-eyed, her hair a mess, nothing like the put-together woman who had raised me. When she saw me, she started yelling that I was the one who was wrong, that I was keeping her grandbaby from her, that she was just trying to save her. They put her in a police car. My dad sat on the curb, head in his hands, looking utterly defeated in the harsh glare of the headlights. At the station, I gave my statement while my daughter colored with crayons, a kind officer found for her. The fluorescent lights made everyone look sickly, casting harsh shadows across tired faces. She seemed shaken, but was trying to be brave, occasionally asking when we could go home. When I asked her about going with Grandma, She said Grandma told her it was a surprise for me, that we were all going on a trip together. The police told me they were charging my mom with kidnapping and attempted endangerment of a child. My dad was being questioned as an accomplice, but his cooperation might help his case. I felt hollow, empty, of everything except relief that my daughter was safe. This wasn't what I wanted. I never imagined our family would come to this. I just wanted my daughter to be safe. We went home late that night. I tucked my daughter in and watched her sleep for a while, the steady rise and fall of her chest hypnotic. She had nightmares that night, waking up crying twice. I held her each time, assuring her she was safe, that I wouldn't let anyone take her away again. The next morning, I called a family lawyer named William, who a coworker had recommended. He came to my house, his briefcase worn at the edges, and helped me file for a restraining order against both my parents. It felt extreme, but necessary. The legal language cold and impersonal on the forms. Days passed. My mom was held for psychiatric evaluation and denied bail due to the severity of the charges and risk she posed. My dad called, crying, apologizing. He said he'd moved out, was staying with his brother, that he couldn't be with my mom anymore after what she'd done. I felt bad for him, but told him I needed time. His sobs echoed in my ear long after I hung up. I thought that would be the end of it. I really did. But a week later, I got a call from my daughter's school again. Someone claiming to be her aunt had tried to pick her up. Thankfully, the school checked the approved list and refused. The woman left before anyone could question her, hurrying to a car waiting at the curb. The description matched my mom, her height, her distinctive red coat, the way she carried herself. I was stunned. How was she out? William investigated and discovered she'd been released on bail with conditions not to contact us, conditions she'd immediately violated. I pulled my daughter out of that school immediately, found a new one across town, with better security and a gated entrance, changed our phone numbers, started looking for a new apartment in a different neighborhood. I took a week off work to get everything sorted, the days passing in a blur of paperwork and packing boxes. My boss was understanding, especially after I explained the situation. My coworkers even took up a collection to help with moving costs, the envelope of cash making me tear up when Jennifer handed it to me. Just when I thought we were getting back on track, I came home one day to find our apartment had been broken into. The door showed signs of tampering, the lock damaged. Nothing was stolen, but things were moved around. My daughter's room had been organized, exactly the way my mom used to do it. Clothes folded with military precision, toys arranged by size and color. The police came, took fingerprints, but I already knew. The invasion of our space left me feeling violated, unsafe in my own home. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every noise made me jump. The refrigerator humming, the building settling, a car passing outside. I put a chair against my bedroom door and had my daughter sleep next to me, her small body curled against mine. In the morning, I found a note slipped under our front door, the paper folded neatly in half. I'm only trying to help. You're not doing it right. No signature needed. I recognized the handwriting immediately, the looping curves of my mother's penmanship. I called Thomas again. He came over right away, still in uniform from his shift, looked at the note, and suggested we set up a sting. He'd have plainclothes officers watch the apartment, catch my mom in the act if she came back. I agreed immediately. Anything to end this nightmare, to stop looking over my shoulder constantly. For 3 days, nothing happened. Then on the 4th night, while my daughter and I were staying at a hotel as Thomas suggested, they caught her. She had another key made somehow, probably from an impression she'd taken during her previous break-in. She was inside our apartment, rearranging things, putting up old photos of herself with my daughter from years ago, creating a shrine of sorts on the bedroom wall. This time, they kept her in custody. The judge denied bail given the repeated violations, citing her as a flight risk and danger to others. My dad called, sounding broken, his voice barely above a whisper. He asked if I would consider letting my mom get psychiatric help instead of jail time, said she wasn't well, that she needed treatment, not punishment, that the woman who did these things wasn't the woman he'd married 40 years ago. Part of me wanted her to rot in a cell, but another part remembered the mom who raised me before all this happened, who bandaged my knees when I fell, who stayed up all night when I had the flu. I agreed to talk to the prosecutor about a psychiatric evaluation, my voice catching as I made the request. The evaluation confirmed what we already knew. My mom was suffering from severe mental health issues, a delusional disorder that had developed gradually over years, particularly fixating on my daughter after my wife died. The court ordered her to a psychiatric facility for treatment. The doctors said she'd likely be there for at least a year, maybe longer, depending on her progress and compliance with medication. I felt relieved, but also sad, a complicated mix of emotions that left me exhausted. This wasn't how I imagined our family would turn out. My dad and I started meeting for coffee once a month, just the two of us, at a quiet corner table in the same shop where we'd talked before. He was seeing a therapist too, trying to understand how he'd enabled my mom's behavior for so long. He asked about my daughter often, his eyes lighting up at stories of her school projects and soccer games, but respected that I wasn't ready for them to see each other yet. 8 months into my mom's treatment, her doctor called. He said she was making progress, understanding the harm she'd caused. The medications were working, helping her see things more clearly. She wanted to write me a letter. I agreed to receive it but made no promises about responding, my guard still firmly in place. The letter came a week later, 4 pages, front and back, her handwriting steadier than in the note she'd left. She wrote about her grief when my wife died, how she thought she could fill that void for both me and my daughter. how it spiraled out of control. She acknowledged crossing every line, breaking trust, putting my daughter in danger. There were no excuses, just apologies, and a promise to keep working on herself. Reading it, I could almost hear her voice, stripped of the manic energy that had frightened me so much. I read it 5 times, then I put it away and didn't look at it again for a month. I was still angry, still hurt, but something about her words stuck with me. The recognition of what she'd done wrong, the absence of blame toward me, the first glimmer of the mother I remembered. Around this time, I started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee with a woman named Jordan from my daughter's new school. She had kind eyes and a laugh that made me remember what it felt like to be happy. She knew my situation, was patient with my trust issues. On our 3rd date, I told her everything about my mom. She listened without judgment, her hand occasionally touching mine across the table, then told me about her own complicated family. It was nice not feeling so alone, like I was the only one with a broken family. 14 months into my mom's treatment, I agreed to a supervised visit. Just me, no daughter yet. It was held in a conference room at the facility, with her doctor present. My mom looked different, calmer. She lost weight, her clothes hanging loosely, and her hair was grayer. She didn't try to hug me or make excuses. She just said thank you for coming, her voice steady. We talked for an hour. She asked about my daughter but didn't push when I gave brief answers. She told me about her therapy, the medications that were helping, the group sessions where she was learning boundaries. Before I left, she handed me a journal, said it was part of her therapy, writing down her thoughts and realizations. She wanted me to have it, to understand what she was working through. I didn't read it right away. It sat on my nightstand for weeks, its presence both a comfort and a burden. Finally, one night after my daughter was asleep, I opened it. The first entry was dated right after the dinner incident. Her handwriting was frantic, the words jumbled, rage and justification spilling across the page. But as the journal progressed, her thoughts became clearer. She wrote about recognizing her obsession, about grieving my wife properly for the first time, about learning to respect my role as a parent. The last entry was from the day before our meeting. She wrote that she didn't expect forgiveness, that she would understand if I never trusted her around my daughter again, but she hoped someday I might let her prove she'd changed. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I closed the journal and cried for the first time in years, not for her, but for all of us, for what could have been, for what was lost, for the possibility, however small, of what might still be. The next day, I called her doctor. I asked about her progress, her prognosis. He said she was one of their most committed patients, that her improvement was significant. He believed, with continued treatment and strict boundaries, she could eventually have a healthy relationship with family. His cautious optimism gave me the first real hope I'd felt in months. I thought about it for days, talked it over with Jordan, who'd become a steady presence in our lives. She suggested starting small, maybe a video call where my daughter could see her grandma, but from the safety of our home. It seemed like a reasonable first step, a toe in the water rather than a plunge, so that's what we did. A month later, I set up a 10-minute video call. My daughter was excited but nervous, fidgeting beside me on the couch. She remembered her grandma, but also remembered getting sick and being taken. I sat next to her the whole time, my arm around her shoulders, ready to end the call if needed. My mom appeared on screen, sitting in the doctor's office. She'd done her hair, put on a nice blouse. She smiled when she saw my daughter but didn't get emotional or make a big scene. She asked simple questions about school and friends. My daughter answered shyly at first, then more enthusiastically, warming up as the conversation continued. When the 10 minutes were up, my mom said goodbye without protest. She thanked us both for our time. After the call, my daughter said she liked seeing Grandma, but asked if she was still sick. I told her Grandma was getting better, but needed more time to get well. She nodded like this made perfect sense, wisdom beyond her years and her acceptance. We did more video calls over the next few months. Each one went smoothly. My mom never overstepped, never made promises about seeing each other in person, never tried to extend the calls beyond the agreed time. It was the first evidence I had that maybe, just maybe, she was really changing. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to hope that someday we might find our way back to being a family again, different than before, but whole in its own way.